Hello, English learners, and welcome. I'm your host, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Excited to chat about English learning today. Okay, let's dive right in. You have a clear goal. You want to speak English more fluently. Maybe you felt that familiar hurdle, feeling, stuck, a bit nervous, or just unsure where to put your energy to actually make progress.
That's such a common feeling for learners, isn't it? And that's exactly what our sources today are designed to address. We're doing a deep dive into a stack of material that outlines a very specific, structured path, proposing a way to significantly boost your English speaking skills, potentially in just 30 days.
30 days. Wow, that sounds ambitious, right? So our mission here in this deep dive is to really extract the absolute core, the actionable insights from this proposed 30-day English fluency plan. We want to give you the shortcut, kind of, to understanding its key strategies.
And before we even get into the plan itself, the sources offer a really crucial perspective on what fluency actually means here, because it's often misunderstood. People think it's about speaking without any mistakes, like some kind of perfectly programmed robot.
Yeah, which is totally paralyzing. What's interesting, I think, about the definition here is that the sources really emphasize fluency isn't about perfection. It's more about communicating smoothly and with confidence, being able to get your ideas across clearly.
Exactly. Keeping the conversation flowing without too many, awkward pauses or hesitations, at least in everyday situations.
Right, everyday stuff.
Yeah, this plan frames fluency around that confidence and flow in typical daily interactions.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about mastering, say, complex formal speeches right off the bat. They even make the point that native speakers make mistakes all the time, but they just keep going. That's really the core idea. Communicate first, don't get hung up on impossible perfection.
I really like that focus, flow and connection over just error-free speech.
Hmm.
And while this framework is a 30-day structure, the sources seem pretty realistic, saying, building true fluency is a journey. It takes consistent step-by-step practice.
Oh, absolutely.
This plan just aims to give you a focused burst, maybe build some momentum.
Right. It's definitely not about cramming everything in. It's about that focused daily effort. And the focus all the way through is on practical, usable English for everyday conversation.
Perfect. So whether you're just starting out or maybe you've been learning for a while and feel a bit stuck, this deep dive should help. We'll break down this 30-day plan week by week, pulling out the specific tips and kind of the why behind them. Maybe grab a notebook. Let's unpack this roadmap.
Okay, so the plan lays out this clear structure. What's the sort of overarching philosophy driving these 30 days?
Well, the key principle the source really hammers home is daily practice. Consistency is just non-negotiable, even if it's only for a short burst each day. And the plan is strategically broken down into 4 weeks, right? Each one building on the last with a distinct focus.
Yeah, and they're quite specific about the time commitment too, aren't they? The sources suggest even just, 15 to 30 focused minutes a day. That can make a pretty significant difference when you apply it consistently over these 4 months.
Yeah, it sounds very manageable when you put it like that. So week 1 is presented as building the essential foundation, vocabulary, common phrases, getting your ear trained with listening practice.
Then week 2 kind of pushes you to actually use that foundation by actively practicing speaking,
Yeah.
even if it feels a bit uncomfortable initially.
Getting over the hump.
Exactly.
Okay, then week 3 refines things. It focuses on pronunciation, which the sources say directly impacts how well you're understood and maybe just as importantly, your own confidence.
Right. And finally, week 4 is about integrating everything, using it all through real-life practice and immersion, making English feel like a natural part of your environment. It's a really logical progression, actually, designed to move you from just understanding the language to actually using it.
It definitely feels like a deliberate ramp up. So let's start at the beginning. Week 1, building your foundation. What's the core idea there?
Well, the core idea for week 1 is just setting a really strong base. The sources focus on high-frequency vocabulary, those essential phrases, and just foundational listening skills.
And they're quite specific about the vocabulary part, aren't they? Like, instead of trying to memorize huge, overwhelming lists,
Right.
the plan suggests targeting the words you'll actually use most often in daily English. The sources might point you towards initial lists, focusing on essential verbs, common nouns, things that pop up in almost every basic conversation.
Exactly. And it's not just learning the word eat in isolation. The source really encourages putting it into context immediately, creating simple sentences right from day one. I eat breakfast, I eat rice.
Ah, okay.
This trains your brain to actually use words together, which is way more effective for speaking than just memorizing isolated terms off a list.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about functional vocabulary then. What about the phrases aspect?
So the plan highlights learning common conversational chunks. Not just single words, but whole phrases like, how are you? What time is it? Can you help me?
Oh,
The sources really stress that knowing these reduces hesitation because you hear and use them so often. It allows for quicker understanding and response time.
yeah, it gives you these ready-made building blocks for a conversation, doesn't it?
Totally.
And listening. How
Yeah.
does that fit in week 1?
Daily exposure is key here. The sources recommend really simple, accessible content to start, like short podcasts, videos with subtitles that you can follow along with, or even just listening to songs.
Yeah.
The initial goal isn't like perfect understanding of every single word. It's more about getting your ear accustomed to the rhythm and sounds of English.
Okay. And I think I saw a specific technique highlighted for a listening repetition.
Yes, exactly. The source suggests listening to the same short audio clip multiple times.
Why is that?
Well, the idea is to train your ear to pick out words and phrases you might have missed the first time around. It helps increase your recognition speed for those common patterns.
Got it. And for tools, anything specific recommended?
Just the standard stuff, really.
Yeah.
Flashcards, physical ones, or apps like Anki or Quizlet are recommended for that consistent review. And, the simple act of just writing down new words and phrases in a notebook is stressed for helping reinforce your memory.
Okay. So week 1 is really about these simple, powerful steps, focusing on the most essential building blocks and just getting comfortable hearing the language. The big emphasis is on establishing that daily habit.
Right. Which then leads into week 2. So you've started building that vocabulary and phrase base, you're getting your ear attuned a bit. Now the plan says it's time to confront what's probably the biggest hurdle for many people, actually speaking.
Ah, yes, the fear of making mistakes. The sources definitely acknowledge this is where a lot of people get stuck. But week 2 is specifically designed to push past that fear, making speaking the central practice.
Exactly. The plan really insists that consistent speaking practice is vital. Why? Because it forces you to actually retrieve and use the vocabulary and phrases you started learning. It's how you connect that knowledge to active communication.
And one of the main recommendations is finding someone to practice with regularly, right?
Definitely. The source suggests friends, tutors, or online partners through language exchange apps and communities. Having a partner just makes it feel more like a real conversation and less like, homework.
Yeah, it keeps it engaging.
But what's a particularly insightful tip from the sources, especially if you maybe can't find a partner right away, is this idea of dedicated self-talk.
Self-talk.
Yeah, the plan actually encourages carving out time each day to simply talk to yourself in English.
Like narrating what you're doing.
Precisely. Describe what you're doing as you cook or clean or get ready. I am chopping the onion now.
Mhm.
Okay, I need to add some salt. Look, the water's boiling.
Yeah.
It might feel a bit awkward at first, sure, but the source explains. This actively trains your brain to start formulating thoughts directly in English without that extra translation step.
That's a really concrete technique people can use anywhere. And recording yourself speaking is another method they mentioned.
Yes, definitely. Listen back, but not to judge yourself harshly. The idea is to calmly identify areas where maybe you can improve, perhaps a word you stumbled over, or a sentence structure that felt a bit awkward.
Right.
The sources are really clear on this. Mistakes are just learning opportunities. They're not failures. The goal is simply to speak, listen back, adjust, and speak again.
Okay. So week 2 is all about actively using the language, finding your voice, and really trying not to let that fear of errors stop you. Whether it's with a partner or just talking to yourself while making coffee, the key is consistent spoken practice.
Absolutely. So by week 3, you've hopefully got a basic structure down. You've got some speaking practice under your belt, maybe feeling a little less nervous. This week's focus, according to the sources, is refining your sound pronunciation and also significantly boosting your confidence.
Okay, improving pronunciation definitely helps other people understand you better. That's obvious. But the sources make a really strong link between sounding clearer and actually feeling more confident. Why is that connection so powerful in their view?
Well, it seems to be psychological, really. When you feel your pronunciation is getting closer to native speakers, you sort of anticipate being understood more easily. And that reduces the anxiety around speaking, which in turn makes you more willing to actually participate and practice more. It creates this positive feedback loop, you see.
Ah, that makes total sense. Less fear, more practice, better results. And the core technique for pronunciation they highlight is shadowing, isn't it?
Yes, shadowing. It's highly recommended in the sources. The method basically involves listening really intently to native speakers, maybe from videos, podcasts, audiobooks, whatever, and then immediately mimicking not just the words, but the rhythm, the intonation, the stress patterns, everything.
It's almost like singing along to a song, but with speech.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. You hear a short sentence, you pause the audio, and then you try to reproduce it out loud as closely as possible.
Mm.
The sources suggest starting with really short phrases or sentences, and then gradually increasing the length as you get comfortable.
Okay. And what about specific sounds that might be difficult for learners?
Yeah, the plan encourages you to identify sounds that are challenging for you, specifically. Often these depend on your native language, right? Like the sound, or maybe R or L,
Mm.
and then focus specific practice just on those tricky sounds. The sources point towards using things like online pronunciation guides or apps that can offer visual feedback or comparison tools.
And I imagine recording yourself is useful here too, comparing your attempt to the original.
Oh, absolutely. Record yourself doing the shadowing exercises or practicing those specific difficult sounds. Then compare it directly to the native speaker audio. That kind of precise comparison is invaluable for noticing those subtle differences you might not catch otherwise.
Right, you can really hear the gap. And on the confidence front, beyond just sounding better, any other tips?
Well, the sources acknowledge that shyness is totally normal. So a practical tip they offer is preparing just a little bit beforehand if you know you'll be speaking with someone. Even just mentally rehearsing a few sentences or thinking about responses to likely questions, that can significantly reduce your anxiety and build confidence for that specific interaction.
Like having a mini script in your head.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And also celebrating the small wins.
Yeah. Super crucial. The plan really stresses recognizing every little bit of progress. Every word spoken, every sentence you manage to form, that's progress. Confidence in week 3 is built by actively practicing pronunciation, tackling those difficult sounds deliberately, using recording for that feedback loop, and consciously preparing for speaking opportunities.
Okay, that makes sense. So stepping into the final week, week 4, you've built the foundation, practiced speaking,
Right.
worked on pronunciation and confidence. Now it seems it's about bringing it all together in real-life situations. Immersion.
Exactly. This is where the plan really emphasizes surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. It's about actively integrating the language into your daily routine, making it feel natural.
And the sources list some classic immersion activities, right?
Yeah.
Watching movies or TV shows.
Yeah, they suggest maybe starting with English subtitles on, then perhaps trying familiar scenes without them later.
And listening.
Listening to podcasts, music, or the radio, maybe while you're commuting or doing chores. Just getting used to the natural flow and different accents in authentic speech. Right, and reading too.
Reading is also key, yeah. Starting with simpler materials like news headlines, maybe social media posts, or those graded readers you can get. Then gradually moving to more complex articles or books. It helps build vocabulary and your understanding of sentence structure in a very natural context.
But the source seems to highlight speaking as still the most crucial part, even in this immersion week.
Oh, absolutely. That's the ultimate goal, right? It's about actively seeking out opportunities to use the language, joining English conversation clubs, finding language exchange partners online or in person, maybe using online platforms for video calls with other learners or tutors. The goal is just to use English to communicate for real purposes.
Okay. And there was a specific cognitive technique mentioned too, trying to think directly in English.
Yes. Instead of forming a thought in your native language first and then mentally translating it, the advice is to try and generate those thoughts and sentences in English right from the start. The sources suggest this really trains your brain for faster, more natural communication flow,
Yeah.
less hesitation.
That sounds challenging but powerful. And throughout all this real-life practice in week 4, what's the stance on making mistakes?
The sources basically double down on their earlier point.
Mm-hmm.
In immersion, the main focus is on communication and just learning from the interaction itself. Mistakes are going to happen, and that's perfectly fine. It's part of the process. Don't let the fear of messing up prevent you from actually engaging with people.
Yeah, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, or even just communicating. So week 4 is really about actively making English a part of your life, finding ways to use it authentically, and trusting that every single interaction is a step forward.
It's a pretty comprehensive plan, covering the building blocks and then the practical application. But, the sources are also realistic. They address that the path won't always be perfectly smooth. What are some of the common challenges the plan anticipates, and how does it suggest handling them?
Well, they definitely call out that fear of making mistakes again as a major one. And their advice is pretty consistent. Acknowledge it's normal, sure, but understand that the only real way to get past it is to just speak anyway. The more you do it, the less scary it becomes. It's like exposure therapy for language learners.
Huh. Yeah, something like that. Lack of time is another huge barrier for so many people.
And here, the sources circle back to that core principle: consistency over duration.
Yeah.
Even if you can only genuinely find 10 or 15 minutes on a really busy day,
Hmm.
that regular focused practice is way more effective than trying to cram in infrequent long sessions. It's about making it a small, non-negotiable part of your daily routine.
And what about frustration? Feeling like progress is too slow?
Yeah, that's mentioned too. Language learning does take time. 30 days is meant as a boost. It's not a magic wand for absolute perfection overnight.
Right.
So patience and persistence are the remedies offered. The sources encourage focusing on and actually celebrating those small achievements, like recognizing when you successfully used a new word or completed a short conversation you might have avoided a few weeks earlier. Those little wins matter.
They really do. And finally, the challenge of finding practice partners or resources.
The plan acknowledges this can be tricky, yeah, depending on where you live or your circumstances, but it points very strongly to the huge array of online tools available now. Apps, communities, online tutors, there's so much out there. The key, according to the sources, is just being proactive in exploring and finding what fits your needs and maybe your budget.
What I think is insightful here is how the sources frame these issues. They're not presented as reasons to stop, but simply as hurdles to navigate. They're like stepping stones on the path, not impassable roadblocks.
That's a good way to look at it. So let's say you complete the 30 days, you've hopefully built some significant momentum. What guidance do the sources offer for keeping that progress going beyond this initial structured plan?
Well, the number one tip is pretty straightforward. Never stop practicing. The 30 days are designed to build the habit and the core skills, but maintaining and actually improving further requires continued daily engagement. Keep speaking, listening, reading, writing. Make it part of your life ongoing.
And setting achievable goals to maintain direction.
Yes, exactly. The sources suggest setting small, concrete targets. Maybe aiming to learn 5 new relevant words each week, or trying to use a new phrase in a conversation each day, or just committing to a short practice session at a specific time, making it routine.
Keeps you focused. And they reiterate that crucial point about mistakes again, don't they?
They do. Continue to embrace them. The thinking is, if you're not making some mistakes, you're probably staying in your comfort zone and not pushing yourself enough to really learn and grow.
That's a brave perspective. And a key piece of advice for long-term motivation seems to be about keeping it enjoyable.
Absolutely. Stay curious and make it fun. The sources really recommend connecting your English learning to topics you genuinely care about. Whatever interests you now: movies, music, hobbies, news. Learning becomes much more exciting and sustainable when it's tied to your actual passions.
Yeah, it stops feeling like a chore then.
Exactly. It just becomes part of enjoying your interests. And they remind you again that fluency, in their definition, is really about communicating and expressing yourself confidently, not reaching some mythical, unattainable level of perfection.
Good reminder. And if you ever feel overwhelmed or like you're hitting a plateau,
The simple advice is to just revisit the basics. Go back to the kinds of things you focused on in week 1. Sometimes strengthening that foundation again is exactly what you need to move forward.
okay.
And ultimately, I think the sources try to instill a sense of belief. Your English will improve incrementally, day by day, as long as you stay consistent and keep putting in the practice.
So there you have it. We've spent this time unpacking a structured 30-day plan, drawing out the key insights from these sources, all designed to help you build your English-speaking fluency. We've looked at setting that essential foundation, stepping bravely into speaking practice, refining your sound, and boosting your confidence, and then integrating it all through real-life immersion.
And we also touched on how the sources suggest navigating those common hurdles like fear of mistakes or lack of time.
The plan provides a clear roadmap derived from these materials, but that core message that really ties it all together seems to be the sheer power of consistent daily practice and the importance of believing in your own capacity to improve over time.
Absolutely.
So you now have the tools and the actionable strategies distilled from these sources to hopefully guide your next steps on your fluency journey.
Which leaves us with maybe a final question for you to think about. If the sources suggest fluency is really a journey fueled by curiosity and joy, not just checking off daily tasks, How could you approach your very next interaction or practice session in English? Less like it's a test you have to get right, and more like it's an opportunity to simply explore something new with the language.